I wish to thank the organizers of this special conference for their hard work and dedication, and for including me in the program. My grandfather had a vision to send my parents from Bulgaria to the United States in 1940 and 1941 for a safe haven. Not the typical Bulgarian Jewish story. They immigrated to their new homeland and invested their efforts and hard work to make a good life. Most of my small family remained in Bulgaria during the war and then immigrated to Israel, a more typical Bulgarian Jewish story. Sometimes I learned pieces of history. My grandfather had been born in Kustendil and moved to Sofia, where he established a fine men's clothing store. My paternal grandparents were among the first to marry in the Sofia synagogue. Relatives had worked in labor camps. A relative had drowned in the Salvador boat disaster. Some 50,000 Jews survived in Bulgaria during the war, and my relatives went to Israel. 2 large boxes of black and white and sepia photographs from Bulgaria were in the secret passage, or attic, in my home, and revealed people walking down the streets in Sofia, old buildings, mountain climbing, and skiing trips to Mount Vitasha. I only had clues to the story, a few vegetables, but not enough to cook a kvetch or understand the full story. In school, I also had no cohort of Bulgarian Jewish classmates. Their families had come from Germany, Poland, Austria, Ukraine, Belarus, with a history of losing relatives in concentration camps. My story was not their story. I did not know my story. I also see more and more, coming to this conference, how my story is also not like most Bulgarian Jews. The Iron Curtain had prevented people from crossing the border between Eastern and Western Europe. In my childhood fantasy, I thought that the Iron Curtain was a bulging iron wall, thick and lumpy, which a potter had patted down across the map dividing Europe. Over the years, I traveled through Europe. I lived in Ethiopia for 2 years. I visited Israel many times to visit relatives and worked on Kibbutz Ginosar. Going to Israel was profound, but I was still hungry for a deeper history and needed to go to Bulgaria to discover that which had been hidden. In 2013, my husband Alan, who is here today, and I finally went to Bulgaria. I wanted to find my parents' home and my grandfather's grave. In my distorted, unrealistic imagination, I thought Sofia would be dark and drab, gray and brown, like all those photographs in my attic. Surprisingly, Sofia was bright with abundant greens, a deep blue sky, puffy white clouds, bright yellow sun, flowers, white stucco houses with red-tiled roofs, a snow-capped purple-blue Mount Vitasha, and yellow-gold cobblestones that had come from Austria. The colors saturated my soul, and I fell in love with Bulgaria. In 2013, we were at the 70th commemoration in Sofia, where my paternal grandparents had married. And that's where I met for the first time. At the time, I was 62. It took me that many years to begin, and really elementary, to begin to discover the story. I'm a late bloomer. Then, in 2013, I could not have imagined being here today. For many years, I've gathered oral histories from marginalized people and written several books in the greater historical social context. I organized a symposium on homelessness in the Czech Republic and Bulgaria, which the American embassies each sponsored. My determination has been unflinching. In Bulgaria, with the help of the Bulgarian Jewish Community Center, I researched the Jewish community and did oral histories with elderly Jews, I found my grandfather's grave. I felt complete and at peace. I was very happy. I had heard of Jackie Conforti and his films. Over time, I emailed him my many questions. He always wrote back. He then realized I might be able to help him with his work because of my years of working in the Historical Museum in the United States, researching archival documents, artifacts, gathering oral histories, writing books, and curating an exhibit on immigration. After I returned home from Bulgaria, he and I met and decided to write a book based on his oral histories and research to give visibility to the hidden, stolen Jewish narrative. He was a filmmaker, he still is, an oral historian. My experience was as an oral historian and writing books. My role in the project, since I'm not an historian of Bulgarian Jews, was to increasingly, constantly say, you know your story, you know the story of all these people, but you need to explain it in a way that others can understand it. That's a completely different process. So I used to think I was a nice editor, but I don't think so anymore. He knew that the story was important, and we set off to do this daunting, labor-intensive book. After several years, we found a publisher, and just recently it came out in paperback as well. About 35 years ago, as an artist in the surreal and primitive and naive genres, I began to paint images which were not humanly possible to photograph, which I saw inside my subconscious being during my waking and sleeping hours. Several hundred paintings emerged, a liberating, healing experience. I drew with black pens, then my children's colored markers, then gouache paint. The pictures tumbled out almost uncontrollably late at night into the early morning hours before going to work. Markers allowed the hidden, surreal images to emerge quickly, almost like taking a photograph of what was inside myself. Nature, my lifelong friend and collaborator, the sun, the moon, the stars, water, and more, permeated my paintings. Amorphous, ghost-like characters were omnipresent. Birds with bleeding, broken wings flew out of my mouth. Then healthy birds emerged. While I do not know why, I stopped painting for 30 years. I began again when I felt a tremendous urge to paint pictures of the Bulgarian Jewish story on large canvases 2 by 3 feet. As one friend said, it was as if a water faucet had been turned on. The water is still flowing, rushing. Little visual documentation, films and photographs, exist about the Bulgarian Jewish narrative of the tragic events during the Holocaust. Locations of events, people's testimonies, and few documents are the only evidence. After launching our book about the stolen narrative, the intersection of known locations of events and people's testimonies gave birth to my paintings. I wanted to give visual representation to the story and honor those who had lived or died to help preserve their experiences and memories. The stories, places, and documents are true and real. They corroborate each other. The lack of film and photographs provides an opportunity to imagine and portray people's silenced, hidden stories, an alternative visual medium for others to witness. The power of story and memory and their revival through the paintings fills a void in people's stories and their history. For the past 10 years, Victor Mikhailov, the curator of a website, Stara Sofia, has provided me photographs of old Bulgaria to assist me in the historical artistic process, including ones that show the Allies had bombed my grandfather's store in 1943. I also learned that my grandfather's store was on the main Marisa Luisa Boulevard, where storefront windows had been shattered, as in Kristallnacht in Germany. Victor more recently found a picture of my grandpa's store from the early 1930s with a Nazi flag above the roof. Apparently there was a Nazi organization, and if you look carefully, you can see a Nazi flag in the painting by my grandfather's store. They had had an office there in 1933 or the early 30s, and it was, the organization had been shut down. Later, Victor also sent me photos of the Allies' destruction to my grandfather's store. Whenever he sends me photographs, he says, "I just found another photograph of our store." My grandpa's, Victor's, and mine. He has been very, very helpful in the process. Visiting and experiencing Bulgaria, where I saw and touched the land and breathed the air, inspired me to capture the spirit of the places where previously unspoken, hidden traumatic events had impacted the lives of Bulgarian Jews. Throughout the painting process, Jackie guided me to determine which stories to paint and which elements and details to accentuate. When painting these stories, I rely on memory, imagination, feelings, research, and vicarious memory of my grandfather's contemporaries through the oral histories that Jackie gathered for over 35 years. I transmit feelings of grief, loss, struggle, hope, and resilience from my own life through the voices of characters in their stories. Painting backdrops of nature accentuates the mood of each story, but also often contrasts people's traumatic voices. I often wonder, how can these tragic stories have happened in such a beautiful location? Painting these pictures is a visceral experience. I literally throw my body into the canvas, trying to transmit what I imagine and feel to bring these people's story to life. For example, one night I could not sleep because of the intensity of the emotions that welled up inside me. I had to get up to paint the Salvador rocking on the Black Sea during the storm to ensure I would capture the immediacy of the motion and emotion and intensity of the storm as I was experiencing it, and to release the energy on canvas. I could actually hear the storm furiously racing and pounding throughout my body, needing to escape to the canvas through color. The wind blowing, waves roaring, thunder crashing, rain pounding on the water, and I could see the lightning striking the sky and water. The sounds were deafening. Some 80 years have passed, and since the protest against deportations and other events in Bulgaria, yet they still hold a powerful meaning after they have been hidden and buried for so long. Imagining and painting these stories provides an opportunity to revisit these traumatic events vicariously, to gain more perspective, meaning, and understanding in conjunction with other people's ongoing new research. My style is not realistic. I cannot paint people's anatomy with any precision, the shape of hands and legs and contours of faces. They are amorphous, but as my husband Alan said, who traveled here for this conference, these are my people. Their emotions emerge. I transmit powerful, intense feelings through my people. The expressions on their faces reflect profound feelings of loss, confusion, isolation, disconnectedness, shock, pain, and sorrow. Just as my imagination transmitted images which spontaneously occurred in my mind in my waking and sleeping hours some 35 years ago, now, so many years later, I have imagined these people's stories as told in their oral histories through paintings. The two experiences are necessarily parallel and interrelated. I could not photograph the images I conjured up in my mind. No one had photographed the Jewish narrative during the war in Bulgaria. Painting these people's stories defies silencing stories. Issues of self-censorship and censorship, denial, repression, secrecy, theft, or politicization of the Bulgarian Jewish Holocaust. While I paint horrific scenes of people beaten, tortured, raped, drowning, burning in a fire, and dead bodies washed ashore, ironically, it is a peaceful process for me. I feel as if I'm giving life and memory visually to them, acknowledging and validating their stories, paying honor and respect to those who suffered and many of whom died, and sharing these stories so others may learn of the tragedy so long hidden, buried, and unacknowledged. Transmitting memory vicariously through paintings provides an opportunity to share feelings of loss, grief, and trauma into horrific tragedy. I treat my people gently, with care and respect, as individuals or as groups. I feel I'm infusing new life into these characters who are related to my ancestors, who have been beckoning me for so many years to find a way to tell their stories so they can return to life, be honored and remembered so we all can heal and find peace. I will now share a few of these paintings and excerpts from people's oral histories. About the demonstration and about the deportation of foreign citizens, the Salvador disaster, and Sofia before and after the war. I have also painted pictures, although not included here today, about the demonstration in Sofia against the deportations to death camps and life in Samovid and Kailaka concentration camps. More paintings are cooking. And this one comes from the story from Nir Baruch, who talks about the rise of Nazism in Bulgaria after 1936, with anti-Semitic, pro-Nazi, and youth organizations. Moti Kanari, who has been part of this conference, was interviewed by Jackie Conforti. He talked about the intention to get rid of the foreign subjects. He said, even before September 1939, they heard about it in a synagogue, that the Bulgarians wanted to get rid of the foreign citizens. Moti said, the police or military arrested and beat up my family at their home and took them to no man's land. Jews without Bulgarian citizenship, he said, were forced to go to no man's land between Turkey, Greece, and Bulgaria, far away from their homes. Turkish soldiers severely abused the Jews in the camp. Oh, thank you, Jackie. This is a scene of the Turks molesting and demonstrating tremendous cruelty to the Jews. The Jews were then forced to march to Ignatovo, excuse my pronunciation. Sorry, from near Varna. Moti Kanari also talked about the Jews who were then forced to leave Bulgaria for Israel on small, overloaded boats. This painting of, in my imagination, but also partial reality, that I had been to Varna, where my father used to talk about going there in the summertime, was one of the first ones I did. When Jackie looked at it, he said, oh, this is interesting, this is nice. And then I did another one. Oh, maybe you can do some more of the whole story. So, Yakim Vaena said, As soon as we left the borders of Bulgaria, we felt as if something had been taken from us. We left a homeland, and we haven't received a new one. Yakim goes on, the ship was full of people and beyond. For 2 days we sailed, when on one day we hardly moved because there was no wind. But the sun was warm, the sea was quiet, pleasant. Songs were on a ship as if we were not refugees. Here's the painting I talked about that I painted till about 3 in the morning. Yakim continued, a severe storm came. I didn't see that there were cases among the sailors of attacking girls and rape. If they heard that someone had money or gold, they tried to rob. All of this was taken for granted by us. Everyone just wanted to get to shore safely. Adela said, suddenly a father came with a baby in his hand and said, save him for me. Every time a big wave came, it would push me another 5 or 6 meters deep. Then I went up and down in the water. During this struggle, I lost the child. Adela continued, most of the people drowned immediately. I was the last person to get off the boat. And when I got to the shore, this is what I saw. A beach littered with corpses, and they are all blue. It was shocking. Then it started to haunt me. That horrible sight. People were lying there. People are scattered in different positions, eyes open. It was terrible. Sorry. As you might remember or not, this is very similar to the early painting. Only this happens, the Nazi flag is no longer to the left of Halle Market. And in this picture, which I didn't point out before, is the Sofia synagogue, the mosque, the church, and now there's the communist flag. And the rubble. It was hard to paint the rubble, but if you look carefully, my grandfather's store has crumbled. In this picture, it's perhaps the only one that I've shared today where people are smiling. Ernesta Ben Ray talked about the migration to Israel from 1948 to 1950. She said, we too have to tell the story of our lives and how we were saved. I've shared with you today about 15, 17 paintings. I've completed 27, or just started. That's where I'm at this point in the project. Many stories are cooking before I can finally create a full gouvetch. Talking with Vasilis this morning, he has inspired me to paint the stories of the drama story. As for the future of this multifaceted project, I'm exploring options with Jackie for venues to exhibit the actual paintings, which, as I mentioned, are 2 by 3 feet each, to publish a book with the paintings, narration, and oral histories, and to work with him to make a movie with my paintings about the Bulgarian Jewish story, possibly using my personal paintings metaphorically. I welcome any ideas and insights that any of you might have as to future new projects from this. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Marta, very much. Next speaker is